Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee Time at the Water's Edge. I'm Pastor Steve Roby, and I'm excited today for you to join us as we talk about school choices for your kids. Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee Time at the Water's Edge. Again, I'm Pastor Steve. Today I'm joined on my left by our normal co-host, Pastor Adam Rastetter.
What's up, everybody?
And over to our right is Kathleen Riccio. We're excited to have you guys on here to have this conversation. This will be our last one of the season as we break for the summer. Come back season 4 in September. And before I get into why we're talking about what we're talking about, go ahead and tell us what we're drinking today.
Rodney got us some coffee today, some good old salt coffee. So we've never tried this before. We're trusting Rodney, and this is, it looks like a good kind of coffee. It says Silent Service Coffee. It's a veteran-operated company, and there's a little story here about the submariners.
Old salt's like a crusty submariner, right?
Yeah, I know. That's got a pretty cool picture on there too.
But if the salt has lost its taste, how can it be made salty again? If it's old salt.
I don't know. Well, this one said it was chocolatey and molasses salt.
We'll see.
Salt. I love
in honor of a mission called Gold Run by the USS Trout, SS-202 in 1942 during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's pretty cool.
Let's do it.
Cheers, mates. Woo! No, I'm just kidding.
That's pretty good.
It is. It's a dark roast, and so I was expecting to knock me in the chest a little bit. But actually pretty smooth. Good stuff. Thanks, Rodney. Really appreciate you
thank you, Rodney,
supplying all of our caffeine needs. Gracias. Today, so we just finished the school year here in Virginia. School year runs through mid-June, and so a little later than other states. But school's out now. Summer's in, and next year we'll be here before we know it. A lot of parents making choices about the education of their children. Some kids entering school for the first time. Some parents weighing different options. Are they going to go back to the same school? Or are they going to do something different? So we thought it would be good. We received a question like this. We think Kathleen might have asked this question. We joked about that. Sure. We joked about that. But Dr. Newman suggested it too, to discuss this, being in education sort of as his vocation. Yeah. How do parents make these choices? Because when you boil it down, this is a big choice, how you're going to educate your kids. We have 3 options typically. There's really more than that when you nuance each one, but you can private school, you can public school, and you can homeschool. So let's kind of talk about the merits of each one, maybe a little bit about what you've done, what I've done, what you intend to do when your girls get there, and just how we weigh those decisions. How should parents think well about this in a way that's good and godly? Yeah.
Well, my wife, Crystal, she's a teacher in the Virginia Beach public schools system. She's been there since graduating from college. And so, probably a little over 15,
I know, she's only
15
about 25 years old. About 3 years.
Yeah, in the classroom. She's in the classroom for many years, 4th grade, 2nd grade, then mostly 1st grade for quite a while. Now she does ESL. She's done ESL for 3 or 4 years. And so she has a pretty good pulse on the public school system. And so we have 2 daughters, Kate and Lucy. Kate went to Crystal's school when she started in kindergarten. And so she was able to kind of get her with the kindergarten teacher that she knew was going to be good for Kate. And then Crystal moved schools, and it was going to be better for Kate probably to go to the school that was in our district. Yeah, Newcastle Elementary School. And so Kate was there for her elementary school years. COVID kind of changed things a little bit for us because Lucy started at Newcastle, and COVID hit when she was just in first grade. So, it's foundational years and trying to, and just each child is a different kind of learner too, and so we were trying to balance what was going to be good for each of them. And we ended up sending Lucy to Christian school for third grade and fourth grade. And then
2 years private school.
2 years. Yep. 2 years private Christian school in Chesapeake. And then she went back to public school in fifth grade, back to Newcastle. And now they're both in public school. Kate's at the academy in Kempsville, and Lucy's going into seventh at Salem Middle.
Nice. Yeah. Ours has been a bit of a variety, even probably a little bit more of a variety. When we moved to Virginia in 2014, we were homeschooling. And that was, it was a conscious choice. We were in a church that had a lot of homeschool families, so there was good community there. But there was also, we lived in a kind of a rough part of town, and the school district was deemed a failing school district. And so educationally it made sense as well. And there was other desires for us to do that, so we were doing that. We moved to Virginia mid-school year, finished out the school year there. We're in a much better school district where we chose to buy our first home here in Virginia Beach. So they ended up going to public school for the remainder of elementary. Then we chose to homeschool again during middle school years. There was 3 years there, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Well, Malachi 2, 7th and 8th. Michaelan, all of middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then back to public school for high school. And so we kind of took it each year, prayed about it, what would be best during this season. Middle school we thought's critical for us to have more influence, because I think that's a very critical age time where kids are really trying to figure out who they are. Lots changing during those middle school years, and it can be very awkward. Yeah. Identity is a big thing. Like there's a lot of reasons I think if you did choose that this might be the right window to do it. Not just because we did that, but everybody thinks their choices are the right ones. And we'll talk about that because people become very passionate about their choices on this. But yeah, and so our kids both are now graduated high school as of last week. And we think overall, the Lord's will was done during all those years for our family. What about you? I know you girls aren't there yet, but I'm sure you're thinking about it.
Yeah, we plan to homeschool as of now. And Penny, she'll be 4 soon. So we've just started to do some short little lessons with her and things. But Mike was homeschooled for his whole school career. He's the middle child of 6, and his oldest 2 went to public school for a time, and then their parents decided to homeschool the rest of them. So that's his experience. And then I went to a private Christian school up until middle school, and then I was homeschooled from then on out. I did Abeka, which is primarily online, and so it was nice that I was old enough where I could do most of it myself, and my mom would just check me. And I had a good experience, I think, doing both. I think with the Christian school, I definitely learned a lot of really good lessons and just small pockets of things that I learned from different teachers and chapel services, and I'm really thankful for that time. But then I also remember things not everyone who actually went to the school was a Christian, or they were sending their kids there for educational reasons and not necessarily because of their faith. And I think that was good for me to see too, just because everyone's at this Christian school doesn't mean that they're all living the same way necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I was glad that I learned that. But yeah, as of now, our plan is to homeschool. So
yeah. So, I mean, among the 3 of us, I think we all have either personal or experience with our kids in all 3 of these areas. So it's good. It's a good mix of experience to be able to talk about this stuff. I thought it'd be good to talk about maybe some of the advantages of each one, and then come back and some of the disadvantages of each one. And then at the end, just some words of caution for parents and how to think well about this. Does that sound good? So as you guys think about it, let's maybe homeschool first. What are some of the reasons a Christian couple, parents, would want to homeschool their kids? What would be the primary reasons?
I think it's nice for flexibility. You can do a lot of things with your children that, when they're in the school day, there's a lot of planned things in the school day and everything like that. And I not 100% of it is, necessary.
A lot of it's not educational too.
Right. And so there's probably more, maybe wasted time. I don't know if that's the way to say it, but just there's opportunities, I think, in homeschool that you're not tied to the schedule. Bus comes at this time. This is the time you come and go. So I like that flexibility. I like that you can teach from the Christian worldview. You're teaching them the Bible, extension of discipleship. Those are all good things. I'm sure there are many others.
Yeah, I think.
What's driving your choice? Yeah.
I think mainly just like the worldview. I think with just the way that things are going now in our culture, just to be a lot more cautious than I think people used to be, maybe like, a few decades back. I think it's a lot different now, especially with like the internet and social media, and there's just a lot of crazy stuff going on. So I think just taking more caution with that. And then, like you said, the flexibility of like just like being able to change the curriculum or change how you teach your child or like different kids, because your kids are going to learn differently than another one might. But yeah, there's a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think biblically, the responsibility for the education of their kids lies in the parents. That doesn't mean you have to homeschool. That you can make that choice to outsource that in different ways, obviously. But parents have that responsibility. So even if you make other choices, public school or private school, parents still have to be engaged in their kids' lives, what they're learning, how they're thinking about what they're being exposed to, et cetera. With homeschool, I would say for us, the top advantages, one was the extension of discipleship. Like we are charged to raise our kids in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, and to weave that into their education is a beautiful thing. Flexibility, you guys both said that. We had field trip Fridays when we were doing in elementary. I loved that. That was my day off at the church. We'd go do a field trip on Fridays, nature walks, all kinds of stuff.
Really good.
Fun stuff. And so, the not just flexibility in schedule, but flexibility in education. It's like you can cater their education. You have to cover the core stuff of, obviously, we want them to be educated in math and science and those things. But you can also give kids a chance to explore things they want to learn.
Yes.
And that's beautiful, because it's like some of the reasons people don't like school is because they're forced to learn things they're not interested in.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, but when you're learning can be very exciting, very fun when you're actually interested in the topic you're studying. And so it's like, what are they drawn to? Let's lean into that more, and so it gives you a chance to sort of cater the education to that.
Absolutely.
So I think there's certainly those advantages, and you certainly get to shape in foundational years, helping them to think about life and the world through a biblical framework and lens.
Right.
It's much easier to do that when you have that much influence in your kids' lives versus they're going to spend 7 hours a day somewhere else. What about public school? What are some of the things you think are advantageous to public school? If reasons that parents might do that?
Well, I think when you think about a family, what's your financial situation? Are both parents working? And so public school
is definitely the best on the finances.
Definitely best on the finances. And I think as far as advantages go, there is definitely the teachers who are there had to go through enough training to where they've gone through all the schooling. They understand classroom management, and there's definitely a lot to be said for their ability to work and interact with the children, and there's a structure to where there's discipline and things that the kids are in an environment where they are needing to understand there's an authority figure in the room that is not their mom and dad, and that they need to listen to that authority figure. And I think just when we're just talking about homeschool and public school, it depends a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, on the child. Some will not learn as well in the home because they're in the home, and it's hard to make that transition. Like, even though we're at home, this is school time.
There has to be some formality to it.
You're listening to mom, you're listening to dad, and and there's a lot of listening to mom and dad throughout the day. And so I think there is something to be said, I think, to having somebody outside the home teaching. I think that's a benefit, I think.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off of what you said, I was thinking about, I think one of the arguments for homeschool, and like, I'm pro homeschool, so this is coming from me, but I have heard people say, like, well, the parents are the most qualified people to teach their kids, which, like, yes, as far as like worldview and morals and biblical values, like, yes, I would agree with that. But I think, like you were saying, like, what if my kid has like a learning disability or they're having trouble with a certain subject, and I might not know how to deal with that? Then if you're homeschooling, you might have to outsource that or go find help for your child where you might not know how to deal with that. But yeah, I think that's important to remember too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I don't think, so I hear some people say, well, public school, that are pro public school in this argument about sort of creating a missional mindset in your kids.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And I'm like, your kids may not be Christians. Like, you have to realize that. Like, just because they're your kids, just because you're a Christian, just because you take them to church, it doesn't mean they're regenerate. It doesn't mean they're born again. It doesn't mean they're going to be able to withstand all the temptations of the world, the devil, the flesh, all of that in a public school environment. They're going to be exposed to a whole lot more. However, there is something to that argument in the sense that it does train your kids as you're engaged in teaching them in the home, as you partner with your church in raising them to know how to follow Jesus. When they're in a public school environment, there's very clear pictures of for them to point to and to think about of, okay, how could I be engaged in this environment?
Oh my gosh, sorry. I almost spilled my coffee.
Being in the world, but not of the world. I just remember having that conversation a lot with Malachi as his friends started making choices, started talking differently, started doing things that made him a little more uncomfortable. We would talk about that, and I'm like, well, Malachi, if you're following the Lord, you're not going to engage in that. That doesn't mean they're not your friends. I know you care about them. Yeah. But you have to learn how to be in this world, but not of the world. Yeah. And that's a big part of Christian discipleship, and you just get so many opportunities to do that in public school, but parents have to be engaged. Yeah. And so there is, I think it's an advantage, but I also think it can be a disadvantage. That's kind of a tricky one. Yeah. But the learning how to live in a pluralistic environment outside of a Christian bubble, maybe when they're older, high school, I think is a little bit different. And so there's something to that I think, that some kids, and we've come a long way in this, because one of the criticisms of homeschool, I'm sure we'll talk about, is sheltering your kids or them not being social, which is totally not a thing nowadays. Yeah. But to the sort of Christian bubble that they can live in and just be naive about the world. I don't want my kids to be naive about the world. I want them to be informed, but I want to filter that properly. Yeah. And so public school does provide a lot of exposure to the ideologies and different worldviews. And I think that if the parents are engaged enough, they can navigate that in a way that can be very beneficial for kids. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, not that this is like a disadvantage of homeschool. I wouldn't use that word, but if you do homeschool, I think you have to be more intentional about like how and when you expose them to certain things, because they are going to come across it eventually. And so I think you have to be a little bit more intentional than you might be if they were in a public school or even a Christian school, honestly. Yeah. Because I think it's definitely not as common anymore for parents to see it as like, I'm going to lock my kids up and not, I don't want them exposed to anything at all kind of thing.
That might still exist, but most homeschool families are not like that.
But I think that mindset can still kind of exist in some homeschool circles. And like, yes, it is our job to shelter our kids and keep them safe in that sense, but they do have to learn to interact with society. And they do have to see that contrast of like, this is the standard of what the Bible says, and how am I supposed to interact with things that stray away from that?
Yeah, and I think the other advantage of public school is that it does, for the family, not just for the kid, it sort of brings you into a larger communal engagement. And when parents are involved in that, you meet other parents, you meet other families in your community. There is sort of a broader engagement that I think could be very, very good. I know we've been exposed, just meeting kids' friends who aren't Christians, meeting their families and engaging with them has been something very positive over the years. And so, I think that's good. And what about private Christian school? When you're talking about private school, what are some of the advantages of that?
I really enjoyed my time at private school. Like I said, there's a lot of actually, the music teacher that I had was very influential in my life. I think that's what made me want to learn how to play piano and sing in church. And that's where I learned like music theory. And she put all of our Bible verses to music. And like, I still have them memorized, even ones that I learned like in kindergarten. And I have this memory. I was in kindergarten and we had to take turns saying our memory verse to our teacher, who, looking back, she probably was like my age now. And I think it was Psalm 23. I'm not going to sing it. But as a kindergartner, she was like, okay, like it's your turn to do your verse. And she would take us in a corner and we'd say it to her. And I remember asking her, like, can I sing it? Because I can't say it, like, but I can sing it for you. And so I was saying it for her, and I could see her. She was like going like this, trying not to laugh at me, and not like in a mocking way, but I think she was like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. So I have a lot of fond memories of that, and just different lessons that I learned, like I said earlier, from teachers just about the Bible. And I think that had a lot of influence in my faith. Even though my parents were my primary discipleship, it was valuable to have that from other people as well. That's just kind of a bonus.
What would you say?
Yeah. So I didn't talk about my own experience. I went to public school in kindergarten and then went to Christian school, first grade through third grade, and two different schools, one school in first and second, and then a different Christian school in third grade. And so I have good memories from the Christian schools. And there were pros. Even in my own mind, I was like, I had to wear a tie and, the uniform and all of that. And I was like, that is a con. But
if your private Christian school teachers could see you now with your ketchup with Jesus shirt on.
I know.
Where's your tie, Pastor? Where's your tie, Pastor?
I know. That's two demerits. Yeah. So, and I think there was, just in my own experience, and this is what I think it depends on the school you go to, but pretty strict. And so there was definitely then in fourth grade going into the public school, it was definitely, wow, there's a different kind of environment, even a feel in the classroom, not quite as, ruling with the paddle, so, but I think the Christian schools, I love that they are teaching Bible classes in there. They are intentionally, making sure that the kids are getting scriptures, they're memorizing verses. Those are some of the things, and going to chapel, all of the things like that are just, I think, really, really nice for a kid. So yeah, Christian schools are great.
Yeah. Would you rank that as the top choice in your mind?
If you find the right fit.
Yeah.
And just because I think, all and not on more maybe on the schools. Like if you find a school where they do have very like trained teachers who are very good with classroom management and who have a good process for bringing in teachers to where they're vetting them, making sure they really are a member of a church, that kind of thing. I think that, because I think what Kathleen said about going into a Christian school and seeing, okay, not all these kids are Christians. That's important, I think, for kids to know. And then I went to a Christian college, and I didn't really put that together as I thought when I was going to Christian, like when I was in high school, I was a rule follower, I was like, all these kids are of the world. I'm not going to partake in the stuff's going on. And then going into college, that was kind of eye-opening for me. Just I went there naive, thinking that all these kids are Christians, and it was very influential towards me. So I think that's something that is important. The Christian school, I think they're not all created equal.
I was getting ready to say that. All three of these can be very different. It's like homeschool. Some parents just are not wired to teach math to their kids and to teach these other things. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not all, everybody's not created equal. Homeschools don't all look alike. They look very different, very customizable. Probably the most diverse of all these three.
Because there are some homeschoolers that would say that they wouldn't even like sit their kid down at a table. And then there's some that would, and there's some, like, you could do co-ops. There's so many things.
Yep. Yeah, and we had a variety. The year we did it in elementary, we had a room dedicated to it. It was like a classroom. I was the principal. Lisa was the teacher. I was the math guy. Like, there was a very structured thing. Middle school, when we did it, they went to Redeemer Church, had a homeschool academy, and so it was more co-op sort of thing. And so there is... They don't all look the same. Same thing with public schools, depending on where you live. Like in the place we lived in Ohio, we were in a failing district, and it was a very low level income area, very different sort of values and sort of culture versus here in Virginia Beach, where, the first elementary school they went to, 80% plus of the kids were military kids. So their homes, not all, but likely a little more disciplined. It was just very different. It's different. So public schools aren't created equal. There's different funding, different parts of the state. There's so much to it.
That's and I think those nuances that's why every situation is so different. At Kate's high school this year, it's a pretty conservative high school, it seems, and one of the teachers comes in. It was actually somebody who's on maternity leave or something. A new teacher comes in and wants them to put down the pronouns on the paper. And one kid stood up and he goes, "Heck no, we ain't doing that." I mean, so that's it was funny. like this, you're at the wrong school for that, like and I think he knew like they have kind of a very conservative culture. And so he was kind of the spokesman for the group.
And I liked what you said too about Crystal, like being so intentional about researching the schools, and like because she is a teacher, she has the ability to like kind of inspect that. And I think that's an example of like you're still able to be intentional by sending your even though if you send your kids to public
we
school.
chose our first home in Virginia Beach specifically to go to that school. If we knew we were going to go to public school, we chose a specific area where we liked the school and had vetted that.
And I think one of the episodes I did with Crystal, I think it was the Trad Wives episode. That's a good episode. You should go watch it. But we did talk about like you can be unintentional. You can be unintentional as a parent, whether like whatever school choice you make. Just because you homeschool doesn't make you an intentional parent. Like you can be very lazy
do
with
it well,
homeschool,
or do it poorly.
right?
Do it poorly.
And same like whatever choice you make. And I even know friends like when I did transition in homeschool, I had other friends that were homeschooled as well, and now there are some that have fallen away from the church, and like even though they were raised in a super conservative family with good values and they knew their Bible, like that's not a guarantee. If you send your kids to Christian school or homeschool, that's not a guarantee that they're going to get saved and live for the Lord. And I also know kids that like went to public school and they are, solid Christians. And that actually was something when we first came to this church that I really loved seeing, because I think we have a lot of diversity with how different parents school. Yeah. But I just love seeing the families that they do send their kids to public school, but they're super intentional with how they do it. And they still give their kids a Christian education outside of their regular schooling.
Yeah. Yeah. So with private school, we were still on that. I think like the partnership with the school and the churches, usually it's started by a church, depending on the theological background of that school, could be very beneficial, supplemental, putting other Christian adults in their life on top of their parents, on top of their church, members. So that can be sort of this trifecta of education for your kids. You're influencing them in the home, you're engaged in a meaningful membership in the local church, and you're sending them to a Christian school where the teachers are trained. A lot of private schools have very high academic standards. Not all, but most are pretty well known for their high academic standards. So I think those are the advantages of that. Let's quickly just talk about some of the disadvantages. If you say maybe just a couple words, because I feel like we could talk about this topic for 2 hours. Homeschool, we'll start there. What are one or two reasons homeschool could be bad?
I think one thing that if you're going to do homeschooling, I think there's a need to help your kids understand what a classroom setting looks like anyway. Like, because eventually they're going to need to be, in some kind of classroom setting to where, whether it's at church or somewhere else, to where they understand, that it's not a free for all, and so I think there's something that the public school has or the Christian school has that it's like, okay, there's this very orderly sit, listen, don't talk out, raise your hand, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you think the authority piece is a big,
big piece? I do
think
so.
What about you? What would be? I mean, obviously you're pro homeschool, but would there be some things you're cautious of going into that? Of like, this could.
I think I think it could just be easy to fall into being too lax and and almost kind of letting the kids run the show. Which I do agree you should cater to like their learning style, but I think it can be a little too easy to let them. Like, even Penny, like, I'm trying to teach her how to write her name, and sometimes she'll be like, I'm too tired, I'm all done. I'm like, no, actually, we're not all done. So even with that, there's like, no, you, like you were saying, you need to learn how to sit. And at some point, they need to learn, like, you need to do things. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, but you have to learn this, And sometimes I think it can be harder when it is the parent doing it. And because weirdly, sometimes kids will, like, listen to someone else better, and like, not when it's their mom, they're like, no, I don't want to listen to you,
And having a whole classroom of kids that are all doing it. It's not like just you, Penny, you're the one that's doing it.
It's the communal expectation, not isolation. Yeah, that's good. I agree. I think that would be the thing I would put up there, is like it can be very easy to slip into just getting a little lazy with it. And it's a bit overwhelming at first. We went to a homeschool conference, man, in Cincinnati. It's one of the largest ones because we started in Ohio. It's one of the largest homeschool conferences in the country, and just was overwhelmed with the curriculum and the different learning styles, different education philosophies, so much of that. And so
there's so much. But
when you dial into it, you pick stuff, and that's a beautiful thing, but it can be overwhelming at first, and parents can trend towards laziness, and don't do that. What about public school? I think what are some of the disadvantages of public school that you would say are dangerous or to be cautious of?
Just the pool of the world, I think, is one of the main things. You're going to have to be very on top of who they're spending their time with, what kind of of thoughts that other kids are putting into their heads, making sure that you're guarding their minds and hearts.
Yeah. I'd say the same thing, just the exposure to the world, the unfettered exposure. If you're not willing to have meaningful conversation with your kids about what they're learning, about what they're being exposed to, and the kids are hard to draw that out of. It's like, how'd your day go? Good. Well, tell me some specific things. Like, did anything bad happen today? Did anything make you sad today? Did anything, and you have to really work at, okay, what are they actually hearing? What are they actually seeing at school? And that takes a lot of intentionality. And so just the exposure to the broader world there, if unfiltered, can be, again, that draw and that pull of the world can be very, very strong in the public school environment.
I would say the exact same thing. Yeah, just like less control over how they're exposed to things and when.
Yeah. And then what about private school? What's the disadvantage of that?
I would say cost.
Money.
The first thing that comes into my mind.
That's the only reason we didn't do that.
I would say cost, and also just having the notion that, like we talked about, that everyone is on the same page as you, because that's not necessarily going to be the case.
Yeah. That's the thing too, because there are a lot of situations where parents will see that their children are struggling in the public school. They're in a circle of friends and then they pull them out and bring them into the private Christian school, and sometimes it's
still there.
It's not. Yeah, and so now they're in the Christian school, and they've just
you still can't be hands off. Yeah, you still can't be hands off. Yeah, the advantage of that over the public school is that the teachers typically vetted properly, have the same foundation, have the same sort of goals. Your kid could be more on the same page when it comes to matters of faith, for sure. So what let's kind of round this out, get ready to wrap up. What are some cautions that you would want to give to parents, some advice as they're making these choices?
I would say the first thing that came to mind when we were talking about this topic was just the tendency, and to be honest, hear me out, I hear this more from the homeschoolers than I do from, I don't want to say the other side, but you know what I mean, where we can demonize parents for sending their kids to public school or even private school. And I really don't like that. I don't like Christians attacking each other for how they choose to educate their kids. I mean, if you see a parent that's, not being intentional and not teaching them in the ways of the Lord, like, that's one thing. But if you're just, I think we come to these conversations and we want to get our point across, and we want to be almost like puff ourselves up by telling the other person why their choice is less right than ours. And I think that's wrong. Like, I was thinking about Philippians 2:3. It says, do nothing from selfish ambition. And just that first part, like, are you coming to this conversation with the ambition that you just want to feel like you're the better parent because you homeschool? I feel like I see that a lot.
And I
know, and I know there's genuine concerns from that side of why you wouldn't want to choose public school. But I think, like we talked about, there's so much nuance, and there's so many different ways that you can approach doing public school. It doesn't mean that you're just dropping your kids off to the world and not even trying to teach them about the Bible. I think that's the main thing that I would say.
I like that.
When you had said that earlier, I immediately thought we do this with everything. Like whenever people make an intentional sort of lifestyle choice, they put a lot of thought into it. And when you put a lot of thought into it, you become very passionate about it. You can almost preach that like the gospel. I was talking about that with fitness. It's like when CrossFit became a thing. It was like if you knew someone that did CrossFit, you knew it because they would talk about it all the time. Same thing with like your diet. People that became vegan, when that became like really popular, or whatever diet fad, it's like people become very passionate about trying to convert people to those ways of life, and we can do that with even educating our kids, and in the process, I think there is a lot of pride that can come up in that that you're getting at. I think that's good. I would just, my advice would be, if you're unsure, spend a lot of time praying, spend a lot of time talking to your spouse, and take it a year at a time.
Yeah.
You know, we went back and forth. We public school, then we homeschooled, then we public school, then we homeschooled, then we public school, and we just thought each year we were laying that before the Lord, like this is the right choice this year, and I think that's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to say the same exact thing, because as you guys were just sharing how we can kind of dig our heels in and say this is the right way. Well, it, you know, year by year, it, you know, you may seek the Lord, and is this working? What's happening right now in the school? Is this working? What's happening at home? Is this working? And it might not even be like a, you know, if you have 4 kids, we're doing it all the same with all 4 of them. It depends, you know, maybe it's working for 2 of them and not for 2 or 3, you know, so year by year,
stay engaged,
case by case,
stay responsive.
Yeah. There's not, I would just say there's not a one size fits all, you know.
It's not a moral issue.
No, absolutely.
If you're concerned about raising your kids in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, you can do that.
Yeah.
Right in your home. You're supposed to be doing that, right?
Yeah.
Lean into that, disciple your kids, do family worship, be meaningful members of a local church that teaches good Bible teaching, and have your kids in that environment, you know, and I think that that's part of the education of your kids. It's not just the formal classroom settings that we put them in. Good stuff. Anything else before we wrap up?
No.
Awesome. Yeah. Parents, pray about it. God bless you. Have a great day. This is the end of season 3. And so if you are not subscribed to our channel, please do. We'll be back in September with more episodes weekly, and we're excited about that. We hope that you would enjoy your summer. And don't forget about us when we come back. God bless you. Peace.